first, live, local. This is Fox 12 Now.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to Fox 12 Now. I'm Greg Nibbler. I appreciate you all joining us. We are live here from the Fox 12 Oregon newsroom, as we are every weekday, starting around 1 p.m. Pacific, going throughout the afternoon. I always like to remind you of that because this is an opportunity to tune in and join here as we cover a wide range of topics on this show, but you can always watch them afterwards, and we appreciate those who do so, and of course you can share them as well. Right now we're going to continue something that we started last week. You may have seen it, you may have not, when I went out to the Grant House, which is on the grounds of the Fort Vancouver National Historic Site in Vancouver, Washington. Now the Grant House is pretty immaculate. It is 175 years old. There are not many buildings that are that old in the entire Northwest. There's very few actually that are older than that. And so it's a pretty remarkable just in that stance, but also the fact that former General Ulysses S. Grant and former President Ulysses S. Grant, same person, also didn't reside there. That's a little bit of a misnomer, but visited there, was on the grounds, was stationed there. And so somewhere along the lines it got named the Grant House, but he was in there before. So we're going to be talking about that during this. This is the extended version of going out there, so we find out a lot more information. We talked to a couple of different people, including a President Grant reenactor named Jeff Davis, who we just talk about that with him and get some pretty interesting facts. And it's always nice to learn a little bit more about the history of the area, and so that's what we do with this. So let's go ahead and play it right now. We are here in Vancouver at the Grant House, 175 years old. I'm here with Temple. Temple, can you walk us through here and give us a little tour of the house and what to expect?
Absolutely, come on in.
All right. I mean, I gotta say, the second you walk in, this does feel like it's old, although there's a few amenities that are a little bit newer that I think that may stand out.
So the first amenity you'll notice when you walk in is that we have a wine bar. Willful Wine is our main tenant here in the Grant House. It's a beautiful place to come and have a glass of wine, some amazing food to eat. We love it having them here.
A little bit of history, a little bit of wine goes perfectly well together. You can imagine Grant in here or somebody, drinking wine. Maybe not quite as nice of a bar back then, but, not quite the same setup. As you're going through, one of the things that just stands out to me is, you can even see, like all old houses, things don't necessarily line up exactly as they would. My house is like that. You can see like the old staircases. It really is beautiful, and just thinking about all the history that's been here.
This house is originally a log cabin, and if you come in a little bit more, you can see the original logs here. These are the original logs that this house is built of, and throughout. In the 1850s, they did side the house, so this is the place, though, where you can see the original huge logs that built this house.
I love that that's still original. There's even the axe cuts in there. It's just amazing. Imagining somebody 175 years ago hand building this and putting that work in, and it's still preserved here for everybody to see. And, then once upon a time, there was also former President Ulysses S. Grant just chilling in here, having a good time, having a cigar, it looks like, as you do. Nice to meet you, sir. 175 years, we don't have a lot of things that are amazing like this for history, so come on out and check it out. All right, well, I am here with Ulysses S. Grant, obviously.
Call me Ulysses.
Ulysses, there we go. And and thank you, for sitting down here and talking with us.
It's my pleasure, sir.
Indeed. And now, what I think is really, this is the Grant House, and I wanted to know just a little bit more about the history of Ulysses S. Grant being here, because, you think about it, that kind of name and just a luminary in American history, but he was here at this place.
He was indeed. It's an interesting bit of history. We only tend to think about people, if they became generals, only about the period general. They had to start somewhere. So Grant was here. His paid rank was lieutenant. He was breveted, temporarily raised in rank to captain for bravery in the Mexican-American War. So he was here in 1852 to 1853. He was a lieutenant on the list, perhaps for promotion, and he was the regimental quartermaster. He was the one who made sure they had beans and clothing. So he never lived in this building. And it's one of these historical questions in 175 years, how did the name get stuck onto the building? This was the post commander's residence. And so Grant, where he lived as a quartermaster, he lived in a house in a whole complex down by the Columbia River. That was where all the commerce came in.
And yet somehow the house ended up being named after him somewhere down the line.
Exactly. Now, this building was originally a post commander's residence, And then in the late 1870s, they built some new grander buildings for the generals who were here. By 1885, 1886, this was the officers' club all the way to the end of World War I. Eventually became the Post Library, and then after World War II, it became the Ulysses S. Grant House Museum.
Wow. So it's had a lot of life in here, and 175 years just having something historical like this to still exist here in the Northwest. And this is also basically on the grounds here of Fort Vancouver, which is very nearby. So was this also part of that?
When I talk to people about this, I view the whole landscape before the English arrived, before the Americans arrived, as Native American land. And so they had their own name for the landscape. The Hudson's Bay Company moved in the mid-1820s, and they named their post Fort Vancouver. When the U.S. Army arrived, it's still the same piece of land, and initially this was the Columbia Barracks. Then they changed the name to Fort Vancouver when the Hudson's Bay Company left, and by the 1880s, this became the Vancouver Barracks all the way until the Army left in 2011.
Wow. So again, showing all that different life and all this different part of it, and I think it's really fascinating that, Grant being here then, and then one other quick thing about Grant too, he came back.
Yes. Grant, after the Civil War, a couple years later, he was president of the United States. His presidency ended in the late 1870s, so he took a 2.5-year trip around the world as a retired former president. So he came here to the Pacific Northwest. It was October of 1879. He went from Japan by boat to Central California, San Francisco, to Astoria, to Vancouver first, then Portland, and then he went back to California and to the East Coast.
Wow. And imagine traveling then, coordinating that. I typed in Google Maps even to come just here today, even though it's easy to find. So I can't imagine what that was like. But again, learning part of this history here. And that's why, really appreciate being able to talk to you and keep this all alive and well and so tangible for everybody. Thank you so much.
My pleasure. Thank you for stopping in. Thank you.
All right, we are sitting here in the Grant House. I'm not sure which room this would be.
We call it the East Parlor.
The East Parlor. Okay, we are here in the East Parlor, and we've got two guests with us. And why don't, if you don't mind, if you could each introduce yourselves and just let us know what organization it is.
Sure. I'm Temple Lentz, and I'm the president and CEO of the Historic Trust.
All right, and
My name is Michael Walker, and I'm the executive director of the Vancouver's Downtown Association.
well, thank you both for having us in here. I personally love history, and I think anytime you can have something like this, especially here in the Northwest, that's preserved, that's as old as this is, because there's not a lot of older buildings than this. I looked it up. I did a little research on that. And, to be able to come in here and actually walk through something like this is pretty amazing. And, that's a lot of the work that goes to preserving this. If you've ever been in an old building or an old house, it takes a lot of work, and I'm sure that's what it is for this.
Absolutely, and that is the work of the Historic Trust. The Grant House is on Officers Row in the Historic Reserve, which is the site of the old Vancouver Barracks. Where we're located, for folks who might not know, although we think everybody should know, we're right off of the Mill Plain exit on I-5 in Vancouver. We manage this property. We don't own it. It's owned by the City of Vancouver. But we have the charge of maintaining and preserving 21 buildings on Officers Row and another about 15 over in the West Barracks area. And it's our job to keep these buildings up. And we love it because there is so much history in these buildings. Not just the stories of the people, but also just the architecture and the beauty of these buildings. It does take a lot of work. They're not getting any younger. As you can see, they're incredible, and there's not a lot like them, and that's what we take pride in doing.
Being able to literally walk through history like this and know that, I know there's a lot of other people that were here too, but know that Grant was here walking around in this same building. It's kind of a strange feeling just to have that, particularly in the Northwest. We don't have a lot of that, especially back then. We were way out there in the middle of nowhere. You think we are now, but to have people like that here, walking around. And Michael, can you tell us, just about the city of Vancouver and how important this is to that?
The Officers Row area is a remarkable case study on preservation. It took a group of folks to arise back in the 1970s to save this place. What's really interesting is the way in which these historic buildings have been reused, both for small businesses to locate, like Willful Wine here in the Grant House, and then we also have residential units, ranging from apartments, duplexes, and condos. And we have spectacular event venues to host weddings and company parties. It's really important to celebrate buildings, but also preserve them for the sake of current modern uses, and I've been really pleased in that respect. What's also really interesting about this particular property is how close it is to downtown Vancouver. Within a 5-minute walk, you can get to the main street. Within about a 15-minute walk, you can get to the brand new waterfront. So that really touches on, you know, it's an accessible place as well. We call this the Central Park of downtown Vancouver. So within a 15-minute walk or so, you can see 3 distinct districts and really go back in time in a pastoral setting here on Officers Row.
Yeah, you see some of the newest stuff in Vancouver there, right on the waterfront, you know, which is really amazing actually, and come right over here 175 years back in history to this house. Okay, I do have one question, and have there been any ghost stories?
They don't let us talk about that. Well, I say they. Our director of historic preservation encouraged us to tell the stories, not about the ghosts, but maybe, you know.
Fair enough. We will leave it there to be determined. Well, great. It's just really nice to sit down and talk to both of you, about this. And again, to have something like this that's so accessible, as you mentioned, get to check it all out. And part of the things that I love too is just how nothing is really quite square or even from years of how that all works. But yeah, thanks for having us in here.
Thanks for having us.
Thanks for being here.
All right, appreciate them very much for having us out there. So again, that's the Grant House there, right by Fort Vancouver on that National Historic Site. We always love getting out of the office, getting to check out things like that. If you have any recommendations of maybe some interesting locations or things that are happening around the metro area or really here in the Northwest, feel free to send me an email, fox12now@kptv.com. That's fox12now@kptv.com. All right, we are live here, though, from the Fox 12 Oregon newsroom at the Fox 12 Now desk, and we've got more coming up this afternoon at 2 p.m. I'm going to be talking about the Oregon Charity Championship Golf Tournament, which involves a number of different nonprofits. We've got a couple of them that we're going to be speaking with here throughout the afternoon, and then at 3 p.m., we are going to have the Fox 12 Weather Podcast video edition, so plenty of stuff. And wherever you are right now, wherever you find us, that's a great place to watch us live as well. So thanks for doing so, and I will talk to you shortly. I'm Greg Nibbler. This is Fox 12 Now.